Welcome, viewer, to Final Twilight, the urban fantasy customizable card game from Neo Productions Unlimited. Today we have an oft-requested item, a sample of play. We'll walk you through setting up the game and a handful of turns of actual play to see how the game plays out. We start out by separating our major character and location cards from the rest of the deck. Set your deck off to the side, and we'll deal with our major characters and location cards first. Simultaneously, each player places their major character onto the field, revealing it to the other player. Nate is playing with Karen Neal. Will is playing with Mark Jarris. Next, we review our location cards. 3 location cards are included with each deck. As you sit down to play, you choose 2 of them with which to play with. The 3rd location card is set off to the side. Simultaneously, each player places their locations in the center of the playing field, side by side, in an order of their choosing and slightly to the right. This forms the game board. Each player then shuffles their deck and draws an opening hand of 5 cards. Each player begins the game with 10 money and 10 moren, their life force. Use a notepad to keep track of your resources as the game progresses. Each turn begins with the draw phase, where the player draws up to 5 cards. This is followed by the ready phase, where the player then readies any cards exerted in the last turn. At the beginning of the game, you already have a hand of 5 cards, so do not draw, and no cards have been exerted. After the draw and ready phases is the action phase. The first step is the play step, where a player can play actions, attachments, and minor characters. We'll first play Street Chemist, a minor character costing 5 money, leaving him with 5 money. He then plays the attachment Firearm, costing 5 money and attaching it to Street Chemist. He now has 0 money. After Will has played any cards he has wanted, he continues on to his move step. He moves Mark Jarris 1 space to an adjacent location, Mystic's Shop, and chooses to leave Street Chemist at City Hall. The move step concludes the action phase of the basic game. After this, we would move on to the combat phase, though there are no characters Will is able to attack this turn. Will continues his turn by proceeding to his collection phase. First, reviewing the locations, he has characters at City Hall and Mystic's Shop, allowing him to use their collection phase abilities. He collects 5 money from City Hall and 5 money from Mystic's Shop, putting him at a total of 10 money and 10 moren. Next, Will reviews his hand. If he had more than 5 cards in hand, he would have to discard down to 5 cards. After this, he may then choose and discard a card so that he can draw anew at the start of his next turn. This ends Will's turn. Nate begins his first turn much like Will. With 5 cards in hand, he draws nothing during his draw phase, and with no exerted cards, he does nothing during his ready phase. At the start of his action phase and the play step, reviewing cards in hand, Nate chooses to play Street Chemist as well, costing 5 money, and putting him at a total of 5 money and 10 moren. He then plays Light Sword, an attachment that costs 0 money, and attaches it to Karen Neal. For his move step, he moves Karen Neal to an adjacent location, Master Yu's Dojo, and chooses to leave Street Chemist at Readmore Bookstore. Also not having any opposing characters to attack, Nate passes his combat phase and moves on to his collection phase. Reviewing the locations, Nate has 2 characters in play, 1 at Master Yu's Dojo, 1 at Readmore Bookstore. Following the collection abilities, Nate collects 5 money from Master Yu's Dojo and 5 money from Readmore Bookstore. Not having to discard and not choosing to discard, Nate ends his turn at 15 money and 10 moren. At the start of Will's second turn, his draw phase, he draws 3 cards so that he has 5 cards in hand. At his ready phase, he has no characters to ready. On his action phase, he chooses to play Ghost Pearl, an attachment costing 0 moren, attaching it to Mark Jarris. He then plays a second Ghost Pearl, attaching it to Street Chemist. Because the firearm already attached is a weapon, and the Ghost Pearl is an accessory, this is a legal attachment. Will chooses to activate both Ghost Pearl abilities immediately, discarding them from play to collect 1 moren each, putting him at a total of 10 money and 12 moren. He then activates the Street Chemist's ability, paying 5 money and exerting it to collect 1 moren. This leaves Will at a total of 5 money and 13 moren. Will chooses not to move any characters, passing his move step. No characters Nate controls are legal choices for combat, and so Will passes his combat phase. At his collection phase, Will still controls a character at City Hall and at Mystic's Shop, allowing him to collect from those locations. This puts Will at a total of 15 money and 13 Moran. Will chooses to discard the card Jolts, and then end his turn. Nate begins his turn with his draw phase, drawing 2 cards so that he has 5 cards in hand. Not having any characters to ready, Nate does nothing during his ready phase and continues to his action phase and play step. Reviewing his cards in hand, Nate chooses to play the card Light Armor, a 0 money costing attachment, and attach it to Kara Neal. The light sword already attached is a weapon, while light armor is an armor, making this a legal attachment. Nate then proceeds to his move step, and moves Kara Neal to Mystic Shop. At Nate's combat step, he has no characters for a ranged attack, though Mark Jarvis is now a legal choice for a melee attack by Kara Neal. Nate announces Kara Neal as an attacker and exerts her, and names Mark Jarvis as the defender. Both players roll a die and compare the results of the roll plus any attachments. Nate rolls a 3 for his attack, with a +1 bonus to attack from Light Sword. Will rolls a 2 for his defense, without any bonuses because Mark Jarvis has no attachments. Nate wins this round of combat. Will loses 1 Moran due to the damage dealt to his major character card, and Nate collects 1 Moran due to Kara Neal's ability. This leaves Nate at a total of 11 Moran, and Will at a total of 12 Moran. After combat, Nate proceeds to his collection phase. He controls Street Chemist at Readmore Bookstore yet, and collects 5 money from that location. Kara Neal is now at Mystic's Shop, not Master Yu's dojo. Nate collects 5 money from Mystic's Shop. Nate does not have to discard, and chooses not to discard, and ends his turn at 25 money and 11 Moran. Will begins his third turn with his draw phase, and draws 3 cards so that he has 5 cards in hand. On his ready phase, he readies his 1 exerted card, Street Chemist, so that it can be used again this turn. At his action phase and his play step, Will pays 10 money to play Police Chief, leaving him at 5 money and 12 Moran. He then plays Mage Sense for 2 Moran, leaving him at 10 Moran. He searches his deck for a Street Chemist and reveals it, per the text of Mage Sense, and puts the revealed Street Chemist into his hand and then shuffles his deck. Will spends his last 5 money to play the second Street Chemist. On Will's move step, he moves Mark Jarvis back to City Hall, leaving Police Chief at Mystic's Shop with Kara Neal. Will's combat phase begins with the ranged combat step. His first Street Chemist has the firearm attachment, giving it ranged attack. Will declares his Street Chemist as a ranged attacker and exerts it. He then chooses Kara Neal as the defender. Both players roll. Each player rolls a 3, a tie. Kara Neal's light armor provides a bonus, but only to melee attacks, not ranged attacks. As Kara Neal is the defender, she wins the tie, but because she won on a ranged attack, she deals no damage to the attacking Street Chemist. Will then moves on to his melee combat step. Police Chief is the only character capable of making a melee attack. Will announces it as the melee attacker and exerts it, choosing Kara Neal as the defender. Both players roll. Will rolls a 6, but has no bonuses to the attack. Nate rolls a 4, and light armor provides a +1 bonus to melee defense, putting Nate's total at 5. Will wins the round of combat this time, dealing 1 damage to Kara Neal. Nate loses 1 Moran for the damage dealt to his major character. This ends Will's combat. Will continues to his collection phase. He collects 5 money from Mystic's Shop and 5 money from City Hall, putting Will at a total of 10 money and 10 Moran. He discards Detective and ends his turn. Nate begins his third turn with his draw phase, drawing 1 card to put him at 5 cards in hand. He continues to his ready phase and readies Kara Neal. On his action phase, he plays Ghost Pearl, attaching it to Street Chemist. Next, Nate plays the action Disarm, paying 1 Moran and leaving Nate with 10 Moran, choosing to discard the firearm attached to Will's Street Chemist. On to Nate's move step, he moves Kara Neal to City Hall. Nate then proceeds to his combat phase. Without any ranged attackers, he skips his ranged combat step and continues with his melee combat step. Nate announces Kara Neal as an attacker, and Will's Street Chemist as the defender. Both players roll. Nate rolls a 3, +1 to his melee attack thanks to Light Sword for a total of 4. Will rolls a 3 as well, but without any bonuses for the Street Chemist. 1 damage is dealt to the Street Chemist, which is otherwise tracked using a die or other marker. Because the Street Chemist has only 1 hit point, however, it dies to the 1 point of damage. combat over, Nate concludes his turn with his collection phase. He collects 5 money from Readmore Bookstore as he has. Reviewing City Hall, he collects nothing, as Kara Neal, his only character at that location, is neither a police character nor a citizen character. And with the end of this turn, we conclude our example of play. Gameplay would continue with characters attacking, spells being played until only one player was left standing. A player loses the game when they have 0 Morin, or when they have run out of cards in their deck. If you enjoyed the example of play, consider checking the game out online at final-twilight.neoproductions.net for up-to-date rules, downloadable sample decks, release information, and more. Thank you very much for your time and support.